It started with the sound of gravel shifting under tires where no tires should have been. That was the first crack in the morning, the faint ripple in a life that had always felt predictable, maybe even boring. But in that moment, standing on the dirt trail my family called a driveway, the woods pressing in silent and green around me, I knew something was off, even before I saw her. Even before she looked at me. The town I grew up in was small, one of those places where everybody knew not only your last name but the way your porch creaked when you came home late. I never minded that. It felt safe. Predictable. Like the world would keep spinning the way it always had. Our house sat deep in the woods on land my dad inherited from his father. They had built it themselves, hammer by hammer, plank by plank. A house that was more bone and blood than structure. The porch groaned under every step. The tin roof sang when it rained. The windows always let in more shadow than light. We didn't have a real driveway, just a dirt trail winding a mile through the trees until it spat you out onto the road. No buses came that far, so I walked. Every morning, with my backpack bouncing against my shoulders and the smell of pine and earth in my lungs, I followed that trail toward school. I loved that time. It was mine. My breath, my thoughts. The woods felt alive in the way only silence can make something alive. That day felt like any other until I saw the car. It was parked halfway down the trail, its engine idling low like a heartbeat. I froze. No one drove out here except us. That trail ended at our porch. There was no reason for anyone to be there. The car was old, gray maybe, the paint dulled to the color of ash. My chest went tight. Inside was a woman, mid-30s, maybe older, her hair a shaggy black curtain that hadn't seen a brush in days. Her skin looked thin, almost translucent, stretched over cheekbones too sharp for comfort, and her eyes, dark rings carved under them, as if she hadn't slept in weeks. She stared at me, not curious, not unfriendly, just stared, like she was looking through me. I dropped my gaze and kept walking, but every step felt like I was dragging chains. My skin burned with her stare until the trail spat me out onto the road, and I could breathe again. That night at dinner, I brought it up casually, like mentioning I'd seen a deer. "Hey, did one of y'all have someone out on the trail today? There was this car parked out there. Some woman sitting inside." The air tightened. My mom froze mid-bite, fork hanging between plate and mouth. My dad's frown cut sharp, his glass landing heavy on the table. "What kind of car?" His voice was harder than I expected. "I don't know. Old sedan. Grayish, I think." She looked kind of off. My parents' eyes met across the table, some silent language I wasn't invited to understand. My mom cleared her throat, too quick. "She probably just got lost. GPS messes up all the time out here. Don't worry about it." But I'd seen the flicker in my dad's eyes, the unease, the way his fingers tightened around the glass. He didn't believe it either. The next morning, for the first time in years, they both insisted on driving me to school. My dad usually left before dawn for work. My mom's shift started early too, but they made time. And for the rest of that week, one of them dropped me off. No excuses, no complaints, like it was non-negotiable. I didn't argue. Not much. But I thought it was overkill. I was 14, not a child who needed babysitting. It felt suffocating, like the woods I loved so much had been declared off limits by some invisible line of fear. By the following Monday, though, everything was quiet again. No strange car, no strange woman. Life snapped back into rhythm, so I slung my bag over my shoulder and told them I'd walk. They hesitated, shared one of those tight glances again, but finally let me go. The woods welcomed me back. Damp, piney air, birds gossiping overhead, the earth soft under my shoes. My pace steadied into something like relief, until I saw it. The car, same spot, same dull paint, like the color had been leached out of it, and inside, her. Only this time, she wasn't staring past me. She was staring at me, direct. Eyes locked before I even realized. Cold poured through my veins. Twice. That wasn't coincidence. She hadn't shown up when I'd been driven. She waited. She knew. I veered off the trail deeper into the woods, dead leaves crunching underfoot. I didn't care about ticks or mud. I just needed distance. But as soon as I stepped off the path, her engine roared. Tires spun. She rolled forward, slow, like a predator pacing prey. I told myself not to panic. Keep walking. Don't run. Don't let her know you're afraid. Then, the car door creaked open. I froze. Crunch, crunch. Footsteps dragging across leaves. And then, she said my name. My full name. Her voice was soft, motherly almost, a gentle coaxing that made bile rise in my throat. Something was wrong in it. Hollow, empty, like someone had stripped out the humanity and left only the echo. I turned my head just enough to see her. She stood at the trail's edge, skin paler than before, lips parted as though frozen mid-breath. Her eyes sank deep in her face, unblinking, a puppet without strings. Something snapped inside me. Panic exploded. I ran. Branches whipped my arms, roots clawed at my ankles, but I didn't stop. The woods blurred into streaks of green and shadow. My chest burned, my ears filled with my own heartbeat. I didn't know if she followed, I didn't care. I just ran until the world tilted and my lungs screamed. I finally circled back toward home, hands shaking as I dialed my parents. They came barreling down the road, panic etched in their faces. Before I could even catch my breath, they called the police. But what shook me more than the woman's voice, more than her dead eyes, was what came after. Because they knew. They knew who she was. She's not just some stranger, my dad said, pale as the moon. She's my ex-wife. The words dropped like ice water down my spine. I stared at him, waiting for a punchline that never came. My mom sat stiff, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on some point beyond me. "We never told you," she whispered. "We didn't think it mattered anymore." Her name wasn't spoken, not then, not fully, just the weight of it. A ghost hauled out from somewhere they'd buried it. "She's had issues," Mom continued, each word brittle. "Bad ones." My dad rubbed his face, the lines in it carved deeper than I'd ever noticed. She'd get obsessed with people, ideas. She'd follow, watch, do frightening things. That's why I left. That's why I never told you. The day I first saw her, they already suspected. That's why they drove me to school, why they clung so tight. They filed a police report, but the police brushed it off. Said she seemed stable when they checked, said she wasn't a threat, but she was there. All that time I thought the woods were mine. She had been lurking, watching the house, watching me. She knew when I was alone. She knew when to wait. She knew my name. And what chills me still is this. I never found out what she wanted. My parents refused to say what happened after, whether she was arrested, hospitalized, or simply disappeared again. Every time I asked, they said only, "She's gone now." But gone where? Some nights, even now, I hear her voice in the wind, that soft, sweet wrongness curling between the trees, calling my name. And I wonder, not if she's gone, but if she's waiting for the day I walk alone again. It began with the sound of my own breathing, louder than it should have been, filling the night air like an intrusion. I wasn't even inside my house when it first struck me that something about the air in Brookhaven felt off. The cicadas had gone quiet, and instead of the usual wash of neighborhood sounds, kids laughing, a dog barking down the block, the faint hiss of cars on the main road, there was only stillness. I was kneeling in the flower bed I'd built by the fence, pruning shears in hand, clipping at a stubborn rose stem that had grown wild. My gloves were damp with soil, my knees pressed into the earth. The lavender gave off a sharp scent every time I brushed past it, and normally that smell anchored me, soothed me. But on that particular afternoon, the perfume didn't calm me. It mingled with something metallic, faint, but sharp, almost like blood on the air. That was when I saw him. At first glance, he was no different from anyone else who might wander through the neighborhood. Tall, maybe late 30s, baseball cap pulled low, walking slow along the sidewalk. The kind of man you'd expect to have a dog leash dangling from his hand, or groceries tucked under his arm, or even earbuds in. But he had nothing. No phone, no bag, just a blank pace, as if he was neither coming from anywhere nor going to anywhere. When his head turned, his eyes grazed me like cold fingertips. I nodded politely, habit, but he didn't return it. His gaze slipped away and he carried on, too slow to be natural. I told myself not to care. People walked, people loitered. Nothing wrong with that. But 10 minutes later, as the cicadas resumed their endless chorus and I clipped another rose, he appeared again, this time from the opposite direction. Something in my chest drew tight, the way it does when a storm is gathering. When I saw him for a third time, his steps heavy, deliberate, his eyes lingering too long at the edge of my yard, I stopped pretending. My pulse ticked at the base of my throat. He wasn't exercising. He wasn't wandering. He was circling. That night, lying in bed, I tried to tell myself the silence outside was normal, that the faint creaks of my old house were nothing new. But it felt like the air had weight, pressing against my ribs, squeezing breath out of me. That was the first night I dreamed of glass breaking. A sharp, splintering crack echoing in the dark. I woke tangled in sheets, breath coming hard, convinced for several seconds that the sound had been real. The following days blurred together in a rhythm of unease. Morning coffee, office drudgery, evenings spent in my little yard among flowers. Each time I stepped outside, my eyes scanned the street against my will. And more often than not, there he was. The man. Sometimes walking past without a word, sometimes slowing, sometimes staring too long. One evening, watering can in hand, I saw him stop. His sneakers scuffed against the sidewalk, hands buried in his pockets. His body angled toward me with a deliberateness that made my skin crawl. Hi, I said, forcing lightness into my voice, though my grip on the watering can trembled. He took a step closer up to the edge of my property. His voice was gravel when he spoke, unused, as if the words scraped against his throat. Hey, do you live around here? Yeah, he said after a pause. Neighbor. Oh, I answered, plastering on a smile. Well, nice to meet you. The silence that followed stretched too long. His stare was unblinking, pinning me in place. Then, abruptly, all right, bye. He turned and walked away without looking back. That night, long after I'd locked every door and checked every window, his voice echoed in my head. Neighbor. But he hadn't said where. He hadn't said who he was. The words sat in my chest like a lie. The days slipped by, one uneventful and indistinguishable from the next, except for his presence, always returning, always circling. Once, I thought I saw the black rectangle of a phone in his hand, angled subtly toward me. But when I blinked, it was gone. I tried to brush it off until Rachel came by one evening, her sandals clattering up my porch steps, iced tea sweating in our glasses. I mentioned him, casual but not really. There's this guy, I said, tracing condensation on my glass. Keeps walking past, staring sometimes. Rachel frowned, her brow pulling tight. What does he look like? I described him. She shook her head slowly. Doesn't sound like anyone I know around here. Have you asked other neighbors? No, I don't want to seem paranoid. Paranoid? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Listen, I'm not saying he's dangerous, but trust your gut, okay? Be careful. I nodded, but the word paranoid lodged in my mind like a splinter. That night, lying in bed, I counted the seconds between each house creak. The silence between noises felt intentional, like someone holding their breath. Then came the sound. A faint scrape, metallic against glass. My body jolted awake at 2:45 a.m. My heart hammered as I froze, ears straining. Another scrape, deliberate this time. The unmistakable, stomach-churning crack of glass fracturing. My blood went cold. Someone was at my window. I slammed my bedroom door, locking it, breath shuddering as I dialed 911. My voice was a whisper. Someone's breaking into my house. Please, please send help. The footsteps came slow and heavy across my living room floorboards. The air thickened with each creak. My breath stuttered, hands shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. The steps reached my hallway. The door handle jiggled once, twice. Silence. I pressed a hand over my mouth, certain he could hear my pulse pounding. Then footsteps again, retreating. Hope flickered. Maybe he'd gone, until they returned. Slower this time, like someone savoring the moment. He stopped outside my door. I pictured him there, inches away, ear against the wood, smiling. The sirens shattered the silence, slicing through the night. The footsteps hurried away. A voice thundered from the front of the house. "Police! It's safe now!" When they escorted me outside, I saw him. Daniel Mercer. His wrists cuffed, his body shoved into the back of a squad car. I didn't breathe until I saw the taillights vanish. The detective's words later should have brought comfort, but they didn't. "He doesn't live here. He drove in from Dayton. He's been watching you." They showed me photographs found in his apartment. Dozens. Me kneeling in the dirt. Me on my porch. Blurry frames through my window. My face always at the center. My stomach clenched with nausea. But that was not the worst of it. The worst was waking up weeks later, still hearing the scrape of glass in my dreams. The worst was the silence of my house pressing against me until I felt suffocated. I bought cameras, reinforced doors, adopted a dog. Yet none of it banished the sound of my name whispered from somewhere I couldn't pinpoint. None of it stopped the feeling that I wasn't alone when I stood in my yard. The scent of lavender drifting, roses blooming bright against the fence. Because sometimes, late at night, the cameras flicker on without reason. The dog growls at corners where nothing stands. And I hear footsteps creak across my floorboards, pausing just outside my bedroom door. And when I press my ear against the wood, straining through the dark, I hear it. Breathing. Not mine. Someone else's. Always waiting. Always listening. And sometimes when the silence deepens, I whisper to myself what Rachel once told me. Trust your gut. Only now my gut tells me the man they arrested wasn't the one who broke the glass. It tells me the real neighbor has never left. It tells me he's still inside. I heard my own heartbeat before I heard anything else. Loud, unnatural, like it didn't belong inside me anymore, but was pulsing from somewhere in the room. The sound dragged me up from sleep into darkness, the kind of darkness where the air feels pressed against your skin, where you don't know if you're really awake or still drifting between worlds. I lay there, still, listening. The streetlight outside spilled a faint, jaundiced glow through the blinds, striping the walls, and I counted those bands of light like they could tether me to something real. But the silence between each beat of my heart, it wasn't empty. It was waiting. My name is Elena Ortiz, and I moved to Millstone when I was 23 because I thought disappearing was the closest thing to healing. Millstone was the kind of town people didn't move to unless they had no better option. A sprawl of farmland strangled by the ruins of an industrial district where broken smokestacks stabbed the skyline, half crumbled. People here either grew up and never left, or they left and never came back. I didn't belong to either group, but I belonged nowhere else either. After a breakup that split my life clean down the middle and left the wreckage on my shoulders and debts that grew heavier the longer I stayed in the city, I packed up what I could and drove until the lights thinned out behind me. What I found in Millstone was cheap enough to survive on, A one-bedroom apartment on Elmwood Avenue, tucked behind a row of duplexes that looked more like abandoned motels than homes. Inside, the ceilings flaked with peeling paint. The carpet smelled faintly of smoke no matter how much baking soda I sprinkled, and the plumbing rattled awake at night, like it had nightmares. But it was mine. That word, mine, became a shield. I got a job at Franklin's Market, one of those fading supermarkets with humming fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little sicker than they were. My degree in communications was useless here, but a paycheck was a paycheck. Most of the time I worked closing shifts, alone under the dying lights, the aisles empty by 10. I liked the routine. It was predictable. It meant I didn't have to think too much. And then came the man. He never arrived earlier than 9:45. Always near closing, always walking in with that slow steadiness that seemed deliberate, as if he didn't feel time the way the rest of us did. Tall, pale, mid-30s maybe. His hair hung limp, his face lined in ways that spoke more of sleeplessness than age. He bought the same things most nights: bread, a carton of eggs, cheap beer, and never said more than, "Thanks." But he had a way of looking at me. Not an obvious leer, not a smile, not even hostility. Just an unbroken stare that lingered half a beat too long, like his eyes had latched onto something in me I couldn't hide. The other cashiers groaned whenever he came in. They called him the 950 guy. Our manager, Marissa, once muttered under her breath, "Here comes Mr. Last Minute. Watch how he drags it out." But when he stood at my register, when his pale fingers brushed mine as he passed me crumpled bills, I felt something hollow tugging at me. The first time I saw him outside after closing, I tried to tell myself it was coincidence. The lot was nearly empty, just my old Corolla under the flickering lamppost, and a few rows down he stood beside his car. Not in it, not opening the door, just standing there, hands loose at his sides, face slack, staring toward the store. Not moving, not blinking. My chest tightened. For a second I thought about waving, about acknowledging him, but something in me recoiled at the thought. I got into my car fast, locked the doors, and pulled out without looking back. My skin buzzed the whole drive home. That should have been enough to shake me. But the silence of Millstone worked against me. Silence makes space for fear to grow roots. The first person I told was Angela, one of the other cashiers. She laughed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she restocked gum at the counter. "Oh, come on, Lena. Creeps like that are everywhere. At least he's buying eggs and not like rope and duct tape." Her words made me laugh too, but only on the outside. Inside, the unease deepened. I called my sister a week later, trying to weave the story into casual conversation. "It's probably nothing, but there's this guy who—" "Elena," she interrupted gently, her voice crackling through the phone. "You've always been a little anxious. Maybe you're reading into things. You moved somewhere new. Of course it feels off. You'll settle in." Her reassurance felt less like comfort and more like dismissal, like she was pushing my fears back into my chest, where they would rot quietly instead of burdening her. That's when I stopped talking about it. If no one believed me, then it became mine to carry, and that's when the signs began to multiply. The first was the reflection. One night, as I was locking the store doors, he passed behind me, the glass catching his reflection. Only, something was wrong with it. The outline of his body looked bent, like the angle didn't match his real stance. His head tilted in the reflection when it wasn't moving in real life. I blinked, and it was normal again. Another night, I came home to find my bedroom door ajar. Just slightly. I always closed it before bed. I remembered closing it that morning. I told myself maybe I hadn't pulled it tight enough, but the next night it was open wider. The night after, closed again. Always different, always wrong. I started double-checking locks, pushing furniture against doors, keeping my phone clutched in my hand at night. Still, I woke to sounds, soft vibrations like a phone on wood, except my phone was black-screened beside me. Sometimes I swore I heard breathing, low and steady, just beyond the closet door. I tried to convince myself it was stress, paranoia. Maybe I wanted something to be wrong because if it was real, at least it wasn't all in my head. But the body knows before the mind admits it. My skin prickled before I even saw the car parked outside my apartment at 1 a.m., headlights flooding my window, then cutting off. That night broke something in me. I couldn't sleep, so I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the blinds, counting my own breaths. That's when I realized the closet was open. A sliver, just enough to break the frame of the shadows. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt dizzy. I told myself, "Get up. Close it." I stood. My legs were rubber. Every step toward the closet felt like stepping into quicksand. My hand reached out, trembling, fingertips brushing the wood of the door. That's when I saw it. An eye, wet, gleaming, fixed on me. Not angry, not pleading, just watching. The way you watch something small trapped in a jar. My scream ripped my throat raw, though I barely remember the sound. My body moved before thought, bolting down the hallway, tearing open the front door, sprinting barefoot into the freezing night. My feet slapped against the pavement until I reached the neighbor's house, pounding on the door until an older man pulled it open, confusion written on his wrinkled face. I stammered, sobbed, begged. He pulled me inside and dialed the police. When the officers arrived, the car was still in my driveway. His car. They searched my apartment, finding the closet door wide open, a crumpled jacket stuffed into the corner, and an old flip phone dead on the floorboards. But no man. Later they told me his name was Aaron Miles. Arrested before for trespassing, loitering. Nothing violent. When they caught him, he said he only wanted to watch. That he was lonely. That he didn't mean harm. His phone was full of pictures of me, leaving work, walking to my car, unlocking my apartment. Grainy shots through my living room window. Weeks of me, documented. The detectives said I was lucky. They said the only reason I woke was because his phone buzzed, vibrating in the closet and startling me. If not for that noise, I might not have opened my eyes. That's their version. The safe one. But they didn't see the reflection bend wrong in the glass. They didn't see the closet door shift open and shut on its own. They didn't see that eye, black and endless, unblinking, not quite human. I moved out within a month, breaking the lease, dragging my life away again. But no matter where I go, I check every closet. I push them shut and press my ear to the wood, listening. Because sometimes I hear breathing that isn't mine. And sometimes when the lights are out and the silence stretches too long, I swear I see the outline of a door cracked open, just a sliver, enough for the shadows to bend. And I know he never left. I thought it was just a ride. The first thought that returned to me again and again like a wound I couldn't stop reopening. Just a ride. A ride back to campus on a cold November morning, a 15-minute drive. Nothing more. The way I told myself that, clutching my purse to my chest, was the moment I should have known I wasn't safe. The air outside Ryan's apartment had been colder than expected, the kind of cold that cuts through fabric and skin and bone, the kind that smells faintly metallic as if the air itself were bruised. My sweater dress was wrinkled, thin against the wind. I had no jacket, no toothbrush, no change of clothes, nothing except the warmth that still clung to my body from the night before. I remember Ryan's smile the night before, how easy it felt to fall into it, how I thought being with him meant the world was finally opening up for me. 18 years old, first semester, new city, new everything. I told myself that one night at a party, one night with someone who made me feel like I wasn't just the awkward, sheltered girl from a small town, wasn't dangerous. That night was supposed to be magic. It had been, until it wasn't. The silver Honda Odyssey pulled up too quietly. I didn't notice it until it was right in front of me, waiting, humming like it had been there the whole time. The driver's face was unremarkable in a way that should have comforted me, but didn't. Wire-rimmed glasses, hair graying at the temples, the faintest trace of an accent. "You going to campus?" he asked. And even now, when I remember, I hear those words with the weight of something more. I said yes. I always said yes back then. "This door here is better. Back one is stuck. Sit up front. Safer." I should have refused, but daylight is a liar. It convinces you nothing bad can happen under the sun. I told myself it was fine and climbed into the passenger seat. The door closed heavier than I expected, sealing me in. The heat hissed through the vents, and with it came a smell I can't forget. Not just stale air, but something chemical, faintly sour, like cleaner that never quite fades. He adjusted the dial. "Cold out, isn't it? You okay with the temperature?" "Yes, thank you." I fastened my seatbelt. It clicked too loud, locking me in with finality. The conversation started ordinary enough. Tuition, the weather, his kids. He said he drove part-time. But there was something about the rhythm of it, as if every word was on a script he'd said to other girls, in other cars, on other mornings. At every stoplight, his gaze lingered. And then it dropped to my dress. "You look like you're dressed for a party." I laughed, brittle. "Yeah, just stayed at a friend's last night." "Cold morning for that dress." "Yeah, definitely." The silence stretched too long, too heavy. Then he said, low, almost kind, "Looks good on you, though. Very nice. You are a very pretty girl." Something inside me snapped taut. I gripped the strap of my purse. My smile was a reflex, my thank you automatic, but the moment didn't pass. His questions came sharper. Where was my family? Did I live alone? Was my roommate home? Each one stripped me bare, and then, "Can I hold your hand?" My brain stalled. "What?" He chuckled. "Your hand so soft, can I?" And without waiting, his hand was already on mine, resting on my thigh. Light, almost tender, but suffocating. My body froze. Every muscle screamed to move, but I stayed still, my chest tightening, my breath caught. The car hummed forward, the world outside blurring into nothing. When we reached the dorm, my relief came too soon. He didn't unlock the door. His head tilted. "Maybe I can get your number," I stammered. I don't give out my number." He smirked. "That's okay. Uber has it anyway, I'll just see it there." The blood in my body went cold, and then he leaned closer. "Can I kiss you?" Before I could speak, his mouth pressed against the side of mine, clumsy and wet, landing where my cheek met my lips. I wrenched free, shoved the door open, stumbled out. "Bye," I gasped, slamming the door and running until I was inside the dorm, the heavy glass door slamming shut behind me. I collapsed against the wall. My body shook so violently my teeth clattered. I wanted to scream, but all that came were broken sobs. I blamed myself, for the dress, for sitting in the front, for not saying no loud enough. But deep down I knew it wouldn't have mattered. People like him don't need permission. They only need opportunity. That should have been the end. It wasn't. I reported him. The woman on the line sounded concerned, horrified, but practiced. "We'll suspend his account. There have been other complaints." Other complaints. The words slid under my skin like ice. For days, I couldn't breathe right. The corners of my room felt darker. The glass in the window didn't just show my reflection. Sometimes when the light hit wrong, I swore I saw another face there. His, smiling faintly, the wire-rimmed glasses catching the glow. My friends listened once or twice, then exchanged glances. "You're overthinking it," one said. "It was just a creep. You're safe now." But I wasn't safe. At night, lying in bed, I felt him, not in memory, in presence. A weight pressed on my chest, invisible but crushing, stealing the breath from my lungs. Sometimes a hot whisper of air brushed my cheek, rhythmic like breathing, though no one was there. My ears didn't hear him, but my mind did. "Just a ride, safer this way." I covered my ears. The words vibrated inside my skull, not sound but thought, too close, Too heavy. I begged myself to sleep, but sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant I was back in that van. The same 15 minutes replayed endlessly, but never ended. He never dropped me off. The van just circled and circled, the scenery warping, unfamiliar streets looping like a maze I couldn't escape. It got worse. The van started appearing outside my dorm, not always parked, sometimes just rolling slowly by, headlights dim in the fog. Sometimes I glimpsed it in reflections instead, the faint shape behind me in a store window, the metallic gleam in a puddle by the curb. Once my phone screen lit up in the dark, and in its reflection I saw his glasses, his smile, though I was alone. I told my sister over the phone. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "You already reported it. Don't let it eat at you." The next day, I looked for the call in my phone logs. It wasn't there. No record. When I asked her again, she said she never remembered me mentioning it. Even Ryan pulled away. He grew distant after that night. Texts shorter, then none at all. My friends avoided the topic. I started skipping meals, skipping classes. My world shrank to my room, but even there I wasn't safe, because the van followed me everywhere now. I saw it parked across from the library, though no one else seemed to notice. I saw it idling by the cafeteria, though no exhaust rose from the pipe. I swore I heard its doors sliding open in the middle of the night, though when I looked, my dorm room was sealed. And always his voice, whispering, pressing, curling into me. Just a ride. Safer this way. One night I caught my reflection in the window again. But it wasn't mine. It was his, smiling, lips moving to form the words I couldn't block out. I screamed, but the sound that came out wasn't mine either. It was his voice. The final straw came when I tried to file a police report. My phone screen froze as I typed, the words van, driver, assault flickering and vanishing as if erased. When I stared at the blank screen, the reflection looking back wasn't me. It leaned closer, lips curling. "Your hand so soft. Can I?" I dropped the phone. My body trembled. My mouth opened to cry out, to beg. But the words that spilled out weren't mine. They were his. The same cadence, the same tone. And sometimes, without realizing it, I hummed the same tune he hummed under his breath in the car. A tune I never knew until it lived inside me. I thought it was just a ride. 15 minutes. Nothing more. But I never got out. Because every time I pass a van on the street, every time I glance into glass or water or screen, I see him, and he's still driving. And sometimes, God help me, I'm the one behind the wheel. I never thought silence could feel so heavy, like it carried a pulse of its own pressing against my skin. When I first moved into this house, I told myself I had finally found peace. I was 29, single, newly independent, and had worked hard enough to buy a modest little place on a quiet street in Wilmot, Pennsylvania, a town where the loudest sound at night was usually the rustle of leaves. For most of my adult life, I had valued solitude. I liked working from home, keeping to myself, paying my bills on time. That was enough. I thought I knew what it meant to be alone, but I didn't. Not really. My name is Isabel Hart, and what happened to me here last autumn made me realize solitude isn't always freedom. Sometimes it's a trap you don't notice until you're already caught. The house itself wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a creaky staircase, and an upstairs office that overlooked the front yard and driveway. That office window was my favorite part, big enough to let in the crisp air framed by white trim that caught the morning light. From there, I could see the whole quiet street. Neighbors walked their dogs. Kids on bikes clattered over pavement. The world felt predictable, orderly, safe. At least, it did in the beginning. It was a Tuesday in early October, the kind of day where the air tastes faintly like apples and wood smoke. I was halfway through editing a proposal for a client when something flickered in my peripheral vision. I assumed it was a neighbor's golden retriever tugging at its leash, or maybe a kid cutting across the lawn. But when I looked closer, I froze. A man was standing at the bottom of my driveway. Not walking by, not checking his phone. Just standing there, as if the pavement beneath his shoes was exactly where he meant to be. He wore a gray hoodie, the hood halfway pulled up, and loose jeans that looked a size too big. His face was angled toward the house, toward me. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Can he see me? My desk was pressed right up against the window, the blinds half drawn, the pane cracked open for air. Maybe he could. Maybe he couldn't. I sat there, perfectly still, my hands resting uselessly on the keyboard. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't shift his weight. Just stared. And then, after what felt like forever but couldn't have been more than a few seconds, he turned and walked down the street, disappearing past the corner without a word. I exhaled in a shaky laugh. Probably lost. Or waiting for someone, I muttered, but the sound of my own voice felt flimsy in the empty room. Something about his stillness didn't feel like waiting. It felt like measured attention. That night I called my sister, Maya, who lived 2 hours away in Philadelphia. She was younger by 3 years, sharper-tongued, always ready to poke at my cautiousness. "Izzy, that's creepy as hell," she said after I told her. "What did he look like? Did he say anything?" "Nothing unusual. Hoodie, jeans, he just walked off." "That's not nothing, you live alone, don't shrug it off." "I think you're being dramatic. Or you're being naive. There's a difference." I promised I'd keep my eyes open. But after we hung up, I double-checked that every curtain in the house was drawn tight. The next day blurred by in meetings, the kind where everyone talks too long and says too little. Around 1 in the afternoon, my coworker Ryan was droning about deadlines when instinct made me glance out the window again, and my stomach dropped. The man was back, same spot, same posture. This time I knew without a doubt his gaze was angled upward toward my window. I must have gone pale because Ryan's voice cut through the call. "Izzy, you good? You look like you just saw a ghost." Yeah, sorry, got distracted." But I couldn't stop glancing back. The man didn't budge. He stood there through Ryan's rambling, through my fumbling half-answers. And then, as suddenly as before, when I blinked and looked again, he was gone. That night, I didn't laugh it off. I called Maya again. "Same guy, same spot," I whispered. "He was just standing there watching." "Call the cops." "And say what? There's a man." "Standing?" "Standing is doing something. It's intimidation." I promised I'd think about it. I didn't. But when I stepped outside later, a horrible realization hit me. From where he stood, my entire office window was visible. If he wanted, he could watch me all day, and I'd never know unless I looked. 2 nights later, I was curled on the couch watching TV when I heard them. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching over gravel near the front door. My blood iced over. The steps paused, then faded toward the road. I crept to the peephole. Just a shadow walking away. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. A note was taped to the wood. 4 words, written in neat, blocky letters. "Isabel, answer the door." I dropped it as though it burned. My name. He knew my name. The police came. 2 officers with polite but tired eyes, who jotted everything down without much comfort. "If it happens again, call us right away," one said. Then they left, their headlights disappearing into the night. I barely slept. And at 1:58 a.m. the knocking began. Soft, deliberate, each rap echoing through the house like a heartbeat. I sat in bed, frozen. Another knock, then another. Calm, patient. I fumbled my phone, whispering to 911. The operator told me help was minutes away. The knocking slowed. 15 seconds, 30. Silence. When the officers arrived, the porch was empty. That was only the beginning. The weeks that followed hollowed me out. Every sound made me jump. Every glance at the window came with dread. The police promised patrols, but how could they watch forever? Then, nothing. No notes, no footsteps, no man. By Thanksgiving, I convinced myself it had passed. Maybe he'd moved on. Maybe it was all a strange coincidence. Until February. It was nearly midnight when I glanced outside and froze. The man was there. Same hoodie, same spot. But this time he was holding something small and rectangular. A phone? A camera? I couldn't tell. I dropped to the floor, pressing my back to the wall. When I dared to look again, he was gone. In the morning, at the end of the driveway, I found it a photograph. Me, sitting at my desk, taken from outside the window. That was when I knew he wasn't just watching. He had been inside my yard, close enough to touch the walls of my house. The detective who came looked grim. This isn't random. He wants you to know he's watching. I installed cameras the same day. It wasn't enough. A week later, at 2:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected. On the live feed, the man stood at the driveway staring directly into the camera. Slowly, he raised a piece of paper. Let me in. I called 911, heart pounding so hard it blurred my vision. When the patrol car lights swept the street, he was gone. Again. The detective told me, "You might want to consider staying somewhere else." I did. I stayed at Maya's for weeks. The city was louder but safer. At least it felt that way. When I came back, the house felt different. The silence no longer carried peace. It pressed against me, thick and unnatural, like a held breath. It has been almost a year since the last sighting. No notes, no photos, no footsteps. But every time I sit at my desk by the window, my gaze drifts to the end of the driveway. Because deep down, I know something I can't say aloud. The scariest part isn't that he might come back. It's that I don't know if he ever left. And sometimes when the night is quietest, I swear I hear it. A knock. Faint. Patient. Waiting for me to answer. It started with the sound of my own breathing, louder than it should have been, filling the quiet of the room like an intrusion. I'd been working all morning, tapping away at my laptop upstairs in my little office, the kind of space you make out of necessity rather than luxury. A 2-bedroom house, one for sleeping, one for working. It was modest, just enough for me, safe enough, or at least I always thought so. The desk sat right by the window that overlooked my driveway and the patch of grass I called a front yard. Most days I liked the view. Today something about it felt off. The leaves outside had only just started their autumn change, crisp edges curling at the tips, fluttering when the breeze passed through. I had the window cracked, not too wide, just enough to let the air in, and the faint rustle of branches carried into the room like whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. That's when I saw him. A man stood at the end of my driveway, not walking, not passing by, just standing, facing the house, facing me. His posture was wrong, too straight, too stiff, as if the idea of bending or shifting his weight hadn't occurred to him. His arms hung at his sides like ropes, loose but heavy, awkwardly useless. I froze, hands hovering over my keyboard, unsure if I should move. I couldn't tell if he could see me through the screen of the window. The light inside made my reflection faint, but enough to blur me into the background. For a long, stretched 5 seconds, maybe more, he stared. And then, without hurry, without any acknowledgement, he turned and walked away down the road. The strangest part was how calm it looked. Not retreat, not embarrassment, not even a glance back. Just leaving. I sat there afterward, pulse still climbing, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he'd stopped to check directions. Maybe he was just one of those odd neighborhood wanderers I'd never noticed before. Still, the way he stood there lingered like a splinter in my mind, refusing to work its way out. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, though I caught myself looking out the window more than I should have, checking, rechecking, convinced I might see him again. but he was gone. The empty street stared back, blank and unhelpful. I told myself not to overreact. He hadn't done anything. Not really, just stood there. But the unease stayed with me, curling in my stomach. The next day, I tried to forget it. Coffee on my coaster, spreadsheet glowing on the screen, a video call with coworkers droning in my ears. I nodded at the right times, scribbled half-hearted notes. And then, out of habit more than suspicion, I glanced toward the window again. And there he was. Same man, same spot, same stillness. My throat tightened, words dying in the middle of a sentence. "Hey, you good?" My coworker's voice cut in through my headset, tinny and far away. "Yeah," I lied quickly. "Just spaced out." But I couldn't unsee him. His figure at the end of the drive, the unwavering line of his body. He didn't move, not even a tilt of the head. He just stood and watched. Minutes passed. How many, I couldn't say. And then, as before, he turned and walked away, steps unhurried, shoulders neither tense nor relaxed. Just normal. Too normal. That was worse somehow. The rest of the day blurred. I'd look up from the screen, heart jarring in my chest, certain I'd see him there again. But he never came back. When evening fell, I went outside, determined to confront the practical explanation my mind insisted must exist. The driveway looked ordinary. The lawn was ordinary. No footprints, no scuff marks, nothing. But when I turned back toward the house, my stomach dropped. From where he'd been standing, he had a perfect view into my office window. Perfect view of me. That night, on the phone with my brother, I told him everything. That's creepy," he admitted, his voice tight with distraction. "But maybe it's nothing. Could be some local guy, wrong house, whatever. Don't overthink it." "Yeah, maybe." But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random, that he hadn't just picked the end of my driveway out of chance. I didn't sleep well. My mind replayed it again and again, the figure standing still, the pause before he left, the way his head angled slightly, not toward the house, but toward me. The following evening, around 9, I was half watching TV, the volume low, phone glowing in my lap. My body was winding down, soft with sleepiness when I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate. My blood went cold. They crossed the porch, stopped. Silence for a breath, maybe two. Then they moved again, retreating, fading down the street. I stumbled toward the door, heart pounding, and pressed my eye to the peephole, just in time to see a figure in the dim light, walking away. Something on the door caught my attention, a thin slip of white, taped there. My hand shook as I peeled it off. A note. Scrawled in messy black ink, it read, "Pat, answer the door." I dropped it. The paper fluttered to the floor like it had weight. My name. How the hell did he know my name? I called the police. They came. 2 officers, calm, practiced. I told them everything. They listened, nodded, scribbled in notebooks. "Could just be a prank," one said. "You'd be surprised what people think is funny. But we'll make some rounds in the neighborhood, keep an eye out." I asked, "What if he comes back?" "Call us again. Lock your doors. Don't worry." But I did worry. I locked everything. Checked the windows twice, 3 times. Still, sleep wouldn't come. My body hovered between exhaustion and raw alertness, every sound amplified in the dark. And then, at 2 a.m., it came. The knock, not frantic, not demanding. Calm, even. Tap, tap, tap. I went still, not even breathing. The sound filled the hallway, sharp against the silence. I clutched my phone, dialed 911 with trembling fingers, whispered into the receiver. The dispatcher's voice steadied me, promised officers were on the way. The knocking didn't stop. Tap, tap, tap. A pause. 15 seconds. Another knock. A pause. 30 seconds. Another knock. It wasn't impatience. It was patience so deep it felt inhuman. By the time the squad car pulled up, lights painting the street in blue and red, the knocking had stopped. The porch was empty again. The officers searched, asked more questions, promised more patrols. But he didn't come back. Not for days. Not for weeks. Eventually, the patrol cars stopped circling. My calls with family grew shorter, my explanations less urgent. My friends told me I was overthinking. Work demanded more of me, forced me to sit again at that desk by the window, staring out at the driveway, at the emptiness. Months passed, and yet the fear never left. It changed. It seeped deeper, became part of me. Like I was waiting too, though I didn't know what for. The note still lived in my drawer. Sometimes I'd take it out, stare at the jagged letters. Answer the door. Answer it for what? For who? That's when the news broke. A massive data breach. Names, addresses, private information spilling out across the world. 2.7 billion people exposed. I couldn't stop thinking about it. How much could someone know about me without me ever seeing their face? How did he know my name before I ever told him? I signed up for every security measure I could find. Digital locks, monitoring services, notifications if even a hint of my information showed up online. It helped, a little. But the feeling of exposure never went away. Because here's the thing. Privacy is a fragile illusion. A window cracked open, a name taped to a door, a knock in the middle of the night. Someone can always see more than you think. And sometimes when I'm working late, when the street is too quiet and the shadows seem to lean closer to the house, I think I hear it again. That steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I never answer. But I don't know how long I can keep from it. Because the thought that chills me most isn't that he's gone. It's that maybe, just maybe, he's still waiting. Waiting for me to open the door. It began with a sound I couldn't place, a rhythm I shouldn't have noticed. At first it was just tires on wet asphalt, faint, steady, almost like a heartbeat threading itself into the edges of my evening commute. Nothing remarkable, nothing that should have lingered in my head except that it did. I told myself it was the rain or maybe my imagination, because my imagination was always stronger at dusk, when the city gave way to the suburbs, when the sky turned purple and the air pressed heavy against my windows. But even then I felt it, the sensation of being followed. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31 years old, and I've always thought of myself as ordinary. I'm not the kind of woman anyone notices. I keep my head down, do my work, pay my bills. I work as a junior analyst at a financial firm in Riverton City, the kind of job that sounds respectable but feels like erosion, the kind that wears you down in fluorescent light and endless spreadsheets. My life has been a rhythm of routine. Alarm at 6:15, coffee, 15-minute drive, 9 hours of numbers and emails, another 15-minute drive, reheated leftovers, Netflix until sleep. Predictability was my sanctuary. 3 years ago, I bought a small house in the suburbs, a little 2-bedroom with pale siding and a patch of yard just big enough to mow. My neighbors are mostly families or retirees, the kind of place where people wave from their driveways, where kids ride bikes in circles on cul-de-sacs. Safe, predictable, that's why I chose it. Nothing changes here. At least, nothing was supposed to. The first time I noticed the car was a Tuesday. I was exhausted after a long day. My eyes ached, my brain hummed with leftover noise from meetings that should have been emails. It was drizzling, the streets dark and reflective. I slipped into autopilot, turning onto Lakewood Drive, then Cedar Lane, then Willowbrook Street. That's when I saw it. A silver sedan keeping pace behind me. At first I barely registered it, but when I glanced up again, my stomach pinched. Every turn I made, it made too. At the stop sign, I caught a glimpse of the driver. A woman, blonde, with oversized sunglasses that looked absurd under the gray sky. I told myself it was coincidence. People live in this neighborhood. People drive this way. I pulled into my driveway and exhaled when the sedan rolled past. but it didn't pass normally. It slowed. It lingered. Then it crawled forward, disappearing only when it turned the corner. I stood at my window that night, blinds cracked, watching for headlights. Nothing. Just silence. Wednesday it happened again. And Thursday. By then it wasn't just the car, it was the feeling of pressure in my chest, of watching eyes I couldn't see. That Thursday I pulled over on a quiet street. For a moment the sedan slowed behind me, my pulse racing, but then it swerved away. I told myself maybe I'd scared her off. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But Friday, when it happened again, there was no denying it. I pulled over. The sedan pulled over. Engines idling. Stillness heavy between us. Then both back doors opened. 2 men stepped out, tall, broad, with shaved heads and hard expressions. I froze. Their movements were deliberate, slow, like they had all the time in the world. Panic tore through me. I flung myself back into my car, slammed the lock, and floored the gas. The sedan's headlights exploded behind me as it gave chase, blinding me in the mirror. My fingers shook so hard I barely managed to dial 911. My voice cracked as I described the car, the blonde woman, the men. "They're following me. Please, they tried to..." The dispatcher's voice was calm. Too calm. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Where are you located?" I gave the cross street through trembling lips. She told me officers were on their way. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the sedan slowed, turned down a side street, disappeared. By the time I saw flashing red and blue lights, my whole body was shaking. The officers listened, their pens scratching half-hearted notes. Without a license plate, without proof, they didn't have much to say. One of them shrugged. "Look, ma'am, we'll keep an eye out, but this sounds like some idiots messing with you. Can't keep sending cars out for shadows." Shadows. That word stung more than it should have. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I leashed my golden retriever, Max, and walked toward the park. The sun was bright, kids were playing, sprinklers hissing. It almost felt normal. Almost. Then I saw them. The same 2 men, walking down the sidewalk toward me. Same faces, same stride. My blood turned to ice. I ran. Max barked and lunged beside me, confused but keeping up. I didn't look back. By the time I slammed my front door shut, gasping, they were gone. That was the last time I saw them outside. What came after wasn't about cars or men. It was subtler, quieter, more insidious. At first I thought it was stress. Work was relentless, and my supervisor had started dropping hints about burnout. But the more I tried to dismiss it, the more it pressed in. The house began to change. Tiny things, easy to brush off. A locked door, standing ajar in the morning. The kitchen colder than the rest of the house. So cold I could see my breath, though the thermostat read 72. A faint smell of damp earth in the hallway at night. Gone by morning. Shadows that stretched too far across the floor. I tried talking to my sister on the phone one night. "I think someone's been in my house," I whispered. There was a pause. Then her voice softened. "Emily, you've been working too hard. You need rest. Maybe talk to someone, like a therapist." "I'm not imagining this. I know it feels real, but you've always had a vivid mind." Her words landed like a stone, a gentle dismissal. I could hear her kids playing in the background, her life full, solid, while mine felt like it was unraveling. Friends stopped answering my texts. At first, they promised to come by, to check in. Then their replies thinned. "Sorry, swamped this week. Let's catch up soon." Soon never came. When I called the police again, describing the cold rooms, the shifting shadows, the noises at night, the officer on the phone sighed audibly. "Ma'am, unless you've got evidence of a break-in, we can't keep sending units out. Houses creak, air vents make noise. You need to relax." Relax, as if I could. Nights stretched long. I'd wake at 3:17 a.m. sharp, every night, to the sound of faint footsteps on the stairs. Max would lift his head, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling in his throat. But when I crept out of bed with a flashlight, nothing was there. Just silence. Just shadows that seemed to wait. Sometimes in the bathroom mirror, I'd catch glimpses that didn't fit. My reflection tilting its head a fraction too late. My lips curving into a faint smile when I wasn't smiling. Once, I found myself standing in the dark kitchen at midnight, barefoot, hands gripping the counter. I didn't remember getting out of bed. Small changes crept into me. I started craving salt, spoonfuls of it, raw and burning on my tongue. I'd catch myself humming tunelessly, the same low melody over and over, though I couldn't place where I'd heard it. Sometimes I'd find myself staring at nothing, smiling faintly until Max barked and jolted me back. The car came back once, late at night. I woke to the sound of an engine idling at the end of the driveway. I crept to the window, heart hammering. The silver sedan sat there, headlights off. The blonde woman in the driver's seat lifted her sunglasses. Her eyes were black, not dark, not shadowed. Black, absolute, like holes punched through the world. The men stepped out, but they didn't move closer. They just stood in the driveway, heads tilted, watching. I backed away from the window, barricaded myself in the bedroom. Hours passed. The engine faded. When dawn broke, there was nothing. No car, no tire tracks on the wet pavement. Nothing at all. Now weeks have passed. The police won't take my calls. My sister stopped answering. My friends have gone silent. I live in a house that breathes in the dark, that hums with something waiting. I check the locks 3 times each night. I keep salt in bowls by the doors, though I can't explain why. And sometimes, when I walk down the hallway, I catch my reflection in the mirror. Blonde hair, sunglasses, and a smile that stretches too wide, too thin, painted on a face that isn't quite mine. I was 24 the summer it all happened, though sometimes when I replay those days in my head I feel both younger and much older, as if my memory folds the years in on themselves and makes me into a different person entirely. I had been living overseas for a long time, long enough that the rhythms of American life had started to feel more like something I watched on a television screen than something I belonged to. But when my aunt called to say we were planning a family reunion in North Carolina, I knew I couldn't refuse. My grandmother, Ruth, was nearing 80, and her health was failing. I thought about her kitchen table, the chipped edges of the laminate surface, the way she would serve fried cornbread from a cast-iron skillet blackened with age. I thought about the gravel road outside her cabin, how we would walk together in the evenings, her cane tapping the stones like a heartbeat. I thought about the smell of wood smoke that seemed to cling to her no matter the season, and I knew if I didn't go then, I might not get the chance again. My grandmother's home was in the mountains, in that part of the Appalachians, where civilization dissolves into winding roads and dense woods and skies so black at night you could drown in them. I had grown up visiting that cabin. The place had its own ecosystem of sounds, the coyote cries that rose like laughter, the shuffle of deer in the underbrush, even the low groan of bears that sometimes carried across the valley. But what stuck with me most was the silence between those noises, a silence that wasn't truly silent at all, because if you stood outside too long after dark, you always felt as though something was listening back. My cousins and uncles were used to cities and suburbs, so when the reunion was announced, everyone scrambled for accommodations. The nearest motel was a half-hour away and had peeling paint and buzzing neon that flickered more than it glowed. I was luckier. Grandma Ruth insisted I stay with her. No granddaughter of mine is staying in some rundown roadside shack, she told me firmly. My brother Daniel and his wife Sarah weren't as fortunate. Grandma's cabin was too small to hold us all, and the spare room was already mine. They needed another option. That's when Mark Ellison entered the story. He was a truck driver who lived just down the mountain from Grandma, a man in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, with the sunburned look of someone who'd spent his life on highways and loading docks. "Mark's a good neighbor," Grandma said when his name came up. "Keeps to himself, but friendly enough. He had a 3-bedroom ranch-style house and lived alone. When he heard about the reunion, he offered Daniel and Sarah a room. No charge. It sounded almost too good to be true. I went with them to check the place out, partly out of curiosity, partly because something about the idea unsettled me, though I couldn't have explained why at the time. The drive was beautiful, with rolling hills spilling into shadowy valleys, the sun scattering light through endless forest. When we pulled up to his driveway, I remember saying, "Wow, this is gorgeous," because it was. His house sat on a little rise with a sweeping view of the mountains. "Postcard perfect," Sarah agreed. "It looks like something out of a magazine." Mark came out to greet us, and his smile stretched wide, maybe too wide, as if it had been practiced in the mirror. He shook Daniel's hand, clapped him on the back, and turned to me with a warmth that didn't quite touch his eyes. "Glad you came. Come on in. I'll show you around." If I'd left my impressions at that moment, I might have thought he was exactly what Grandma said, a decent, solitary man being kind. But impressions don't last long in the right kind of air, because the second we stepped inside, the smell hit me. It came like a wall, rotting meat laced with some acrid chemical tang, and strangest of all, the thin sweetness of cheap air freshener, the kind that smells more like plastic flowers than anything natural. My eyes watered immediately. Sarah wrinkled her nose. Daniel glanced at me, unsettled. Mark noticed, of course. He gave a little shrug. "Sorry about the smell. Cats, sometimes they make a mess. I just sprayed some cleaner too. It'll air out." I had grown up with cats. That wasn't the smell of cats. It was heavier, stranger. The kind of odor that burrows in the back of your throat and refuses to leave. The house itself was immaculate. Too immaculate. Every surface gleamed, every object lined up like it had been measured with a ruler. Not a speck of dust anywhere. And yet, no matter how perfect it looked, the stench clung stubbornly to the air, like a shadow that wouldn't be scrubbed away. Mark led us to the guest room. It was pleasant enough. A large bed, clean sheets, a sliding glass door that looked out over the mountains, but my eyes caught on the locks. Not just one lock on the sliding door, but two, a deadbolt and a heavy padlock. I remember Daniel trying to laugh it off. "That's a lot of locks." Mark chuckled. "Gotta keep my cats safe. Too many predators out here. Mountain lions, possums, even eagles. Don't want them slipping outside." But we'd already seen one of his cats lounging on the porch when we arrived. As we toured the rest of the house, I noticed something else. To get to the kitchen, you had to leave the house and come in through another door. The interior doorway that should have connected the kitchen to the hallway near the bedrooms was bolted, padlocked, sealed like a vault. Locks were supposed to keep danger out, not in. Daniel and Sarah decided to stay anyway. Free lodging was free lodging. They avoided being there as much as they could that week, leaving early and coming back late, like the house was something to be tolerated rather than lived in. When I asked Daniel about it, he shrugged. "He's weird but harmless. Probably just doesn't clean enough. Cat food stinks." Maybe, but that explanation never settled in me. 2 years passed. When I came back to visit Grandma Ruth again, Daniel and Sarah had long stopped thinking about Mark. He still lived down the road, still appeared now and then like a shadow flickering at the edge of our lives. That summer, he came by one afternoon while we were sitting in Grandma's living room. He made small talk, then turned to me with a look that pinned me in place. "I just want to apologize," he said, his voice soft, "about how my house smelled when your brother stayed there." I froze. None of us had mentioned the smell, not once in years. "It wasn't good before," he continued. "But it's all cleaned up now. You should come see it. I'll show you every room." I tried to laugh it off. "Oh, that's okay. I didn't even stay there." His face darkened, then sharpened with intensity. "No, it wasn't good. You need to see it's better now. Come over, I'll show you." The air in the room shifted, and I felt suddenly like a child caught in a lie I hadn't told. Grandma urged me gently. "Go on, honey. Mark's just being polite." So I went. This time the house was spotless and scentless. The locks gone. Cats roamed freely. But the way he hovered, the way his eyes tracked every flicker of expression on my face, made my skin crawl. He smiled too much, complimented me too often. "Pretty," he said about the simplest things. My shoes, my hair, the way I stood. When I told him the place looked nice, he lit up like a child being praised. It should have ended there. But a year later, when my niece came with us to visit Grandma, Mark appeared again. She was 8 then, small, shy. He crouched in front of her, coaxing. "You can ride my exercise bike, as much as you want. It adjusts for anyone." I stepped in. "She's too little." No, it's fine," he insisted. "I'll show you." "Then show me how it adjusts," I said flatly. He faltered, then smiled again. "Oh, that's okay. My house is messy right now." But he turned back to her, repeating, "Want to come ride it? Want to try?" When I called her mother's attention, he went silent. Grandma Ruth died a few years later. I miss her still. But I do not miss Mark Ellison, because here's the truth. I don't know what was really in that house. Maybe it was cats and cleaning fluid, maybe the locks were only paranoia. Maybe the smell was nothing but garbage left too long. But the way he watched me, the way he remembered, the way he wanted me to come back and see, to prove something, it still claws at me. And sometimes late at night I wonder if the locks weren't to keep cats in or out at all. Sometimes I think about my niece, how close she came to saying yes. And sometimes, when the dark is too quiet, I remember that smell, the kind that stains memory. And I understand. The scariest monsters don't lurk in cities or shadows. They smile. They offer hospitality. They live down the mountain. They remember you. They wait. And they want you to come back.